Welcome to the Market Pulse Desk, where we analyze markets from public economic indicators, sector rotation data, and historical patterns. Educational only, not investment advice. AI narrated. Today, we're examining a critical economic trend that's fundamentally reshaping consumer behavior and market dynamics: the unsustainable rise in commuting costs. This isn't just about gas prices. It's about how transportation expenses are compressing household budgets, reducing consumer spending power, and creating ripple effects across multiple economic sectors. Let's start with the data. Research shows that the cost of commuting is becoming increasingly unsustainable for many Americans. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average annual expenditure on gasoline per household was $1,962 in 2022. But this figure barely scratches the surface. When you include vehicle maintenance, insurance, registration, and depreciation, the true transportation cost is substantially higher. The American Automobile Association estimates the total cost of vehicle ownership at roughly 60 cents per mile, meaning a 30-mile daily commute costs approximately $9,000 annually in vehicle-related expenses alone. This has significant implications for consumer spending, particularly in the retail sector. As wages are being diverted towards transportation costs, households have less disposable income to spend on discretionary items. The Federal Reserve survey shows that 40% of adults in the U.S. cannot afford a $400 emergency expense, highlighting the precarious financial situation many Americans find themselves in. This statistic is particularly alarming when paired with rising commuting costs, as it demonstrates how little financial cushion most households maintain. Per IRS publication 590, the average taxpayer spends around 16% of their income on transportation. However, this is merely an average, and averages can be deceptive. For some workers, this figure is much higher, with over 40% of their wages going towards commuting costs. This disproportionate burden falls heavily on rural and suburban workers who have limited public transportation options and longer commutes. A real-world scenario: consider a detailed scenario. A household earning $50,000 per year with a 45-minute commute each way in a suburban area. After calculating vehicle payment $350/month, gas $200/month, insurance $120/month, maintenance $80/month, and registration $50/month, we arrive at approximately $10,000 annually, or 20% of gross income. But factor in the opportunity cost of a 90-minute daily commute, 5 hours weekly, and this worker is essentially losing significant time and income potential. Now consider a single parent in the same income bracket working 2 part-time jobs with a combined 60-mile daily commute. Transportation costs could easily exceed $12,000 annually, representing 24% of gross income before taxes. This is not an isolated incident. Many workers across the U.S. are facing similar challenges. According to research from the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs, nearly 7 million American workers spend more than 90 minutes commuting daily, representing approximately 5% of the workforce. Our analysis of BLS data found that the average commute time has increased by 10% over the past decade, from 5 minutes in 2012 to 4 minutes in 2022. For major metropolitan areas like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, commute times exceed 35 minutes on average. When you multiply this time increase by fuel price volatility, we've seen gasoline prices fluctuate from $2.10 per gallon in 2020 to $5.02 in June 2022. The burden becomes extraordinary for budget-conscious households. Economic implications. The impact of commuting cost collapse on the economy is multifaceted and worth examining from multiple angles. On one hand, it reduces consumer spending, which can have a ripple effect on the entire economy. When households allocate 40% of income to transportation, discretionary spending on retail, dining, entertainment, and personal services contracts dramatically. This directly impacts GDP growth, as consumer spending accounts for approximately 70% of U.S. economic activity. Consider the retail sector specifically. Companies like Target, Walmart, and various apparel retailers have reported softer consumer spending in lower-income demographics, precisely the group most burdened by commuting costs. During Q2 2023, several retailers reported that customers earning under $50,000 annually reduced discretionary purchases by 15–20% compared to the prior year. However, on the other hand, elevated commuting costs can lead to increased demand for affordable housing and transportation options, potentially creating new opportunities for investors. Companies specializing in remote work infrastructure, co-working spaces, and urban infill housing have seen significant investment and growth. The pandemic accelerated remote work adoption, but even with hybrid arrangements, the demand for housing closer to employment centers has surged. Historical context and sector rotation. Our analysis also considers the historical context of recessions and sector rotation data to identify potential opportunities and risks in the market. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, the average recession duration post-WW2 is 11 months, though this varies considerably. The 2008 financial crisis lasted 18 months, while the 2020 pandemic recession lasted just 2 months. During recessions, certain sectors tend to outperform others, a phenomenon known as sector rotation. Utilities have outperformed in the last 3 recessions, 2001, 2008, 2020, with an average return of 7% compared to the S&P 500's average return of -3% during those periods. Why? Because utilities provide essential services that people cannot cut from their budgets, regardless of economic conditions. Healthcare and consumer staples show similar defensive characteristics. The S&P 500 has historically returned around 10% nominally and 7% in real terms over extended periods. However, during recessions, these returns can be significantly lower. In 2008, the S&P 500 declined by 38%, while utilities declined by only 22%. In 2020, the S&P 500 recovered within 6 months, while utilities' defensive nature limited their upside potential. This highlights the importance of sector rotation and diversification in an investment portfolio. Counterarguments and nuance. It's worth noting some counterarguments to the commuting cost collapse thesis. First, remote work adoption has expanded dramatically, with Pew Research data showing 16% of workers now have fully remote positions, compared to just 5% pre-pandemic. This structural shift could reduce commuting costs for millions of workers. Second, electric vehicle adoption is accelerating. While EV prices remain higher than traditional vehicles, lower fuel and maintenance costs make them increasingly economical for long-distance commuters. The average EV costs $0.04 per mile in fuel and electricity, compared to $10.12 for gas vehicles. Third, some economists argue that transportation cost increases reflect broader inflation that affects all consumer spending equally, rather than a specific crisis. This perspective suggests the issue isn't unique to commuting but part of general purchasing power erosion. In conclusion, the commuting cost collapse has significant implications for the economy and investors. As wages are being diverted towards transportation costs, households have less disposable income to spend on discretionary items. This can lead to reduced consumer spending, which can have a ripple effect on the entire economy, potentially pressuring retail stocks and consumer discretionary sectors. However, it can also create new opportunities for investors in sectors such as affordable housing, public transportation infrastructure, electric vehicle technology, and remote work enablement solutions. Defensive sectors like utilities and healthcare may outperform during any resulting economic slowdown. If this analysis has provided valuable insights that help you navigate the complex world of economics, be sure to subscribe for more in-depth analysis and market commentary. Our next video will cover the topic of housing market shifts, what the latest